writing code, producing code at scale isn't so much the bottleneck anymore. And if you can ship anything, you probably shouldn't ship everything. I think we're sort of almost on a weekly basis, like looking at the next thing and going like, this changes everything. And then a week later, you're like, that was totally obvious in hindsight. Things are moving so fast. If I leave tech right now, and if I come back in a year or come back in 2 years, can I catch up? Vercel's been for a long time the front-end cloud, which is kind of built around a quick request response cycle. Like we're really good at doing, you load a web page or you load an image. We've been really good at serving that fast to the user. But when you want to run something that's a long-running background task, especially with something like an agent, but there's all sorts of long, cases for long-running background tasks. Vercel typically hasn't had, great infrastructure for that. Workflow is, and there's multiple ways to solve that, but Workflow is one of those solutions where you basically can orchestrate or model long-running compute as nothing but stitching multiple shorter serverless functions together. And doing that yourself ends up being pretty complicated with a lot of infrastructure. And Workflow is our solution to do sort of framework-defined infrastructure where you write code that just natively compiles into all of those primitives for you.
Yeah. Can you give me a tangible example of something that you can do with a workflow that you couldn't do before?
Yeah. Agents are themselves a pretty good example of this, right? If you think about every agent is basically just a loop of like making an LLM call and then running one or more tools right afterwards. More steps, but it's basically just you sort of loop that back and forth. If you wanted to run that in a single request, with Vercel, typically you could probably do this for under 13 minutes on the highest tier, where you can run, that'll loop back and forth on a single request. But agents today are, a lot of our coding agents tend to run for 30 minutes, 40 minutes, and very soon we have stuff that's probably running for a week long. Those are things that you couldn't do before. We're sort of starting to use it all across Vercel.
Yeah. That's cool. Has there been anything interesting that the team has built internally that they've been kind of like demoing or showing off? Do you have any examples that you want to talk about?
There's plenty.
Yeah.
One that's really exciting that is actually Guillermo's weekend, his holiday project in Christmas. And the timing was great because I was also on vacation with the 1 week. I was hoping I wouldn't get pinged about anything. But Guillermo decided he wanted to build an infinite chess game where he basically has, it just picks, basically it's a game that matches random AI agents and it'll pick between sort of libraries. So you might have something like ChatGPT versus Claude, and it'll push them against a chess game. And they just basically go back and forth, play a chess match to the end. Sometimes a single chess match might take 50 minutes because agents aren't they don't natively know what the moves are, and so they have to figure this out. And then once the match is done, it'll just queue up a new match and just keep going. And so you have, basically he started a chess game, I think, on Christmas Day, and that has been looping till now. Even today, you can open up the website and it just keeps looping and keeps playing these chess matches.
So their leaderboard of which models are winning?
Yeah.
Who's in first?
I keep checking, and I think it switches between Gemini and ChatGPT, but I also don't think we've updated to the latest models now. So yeah. And I love it as a demo mainly just because, one, it's something that just wasn't possible in Vercel till recently. And I think a lot of people look at it and it kind of cleanly maps to whatever it is that you're working on.
Yeah. Right? One of the things that's so interesting to me too in this era is we're in the era of personal software. You're going to have your own custom to-do list app. I'm going to have my own. I built an Apple TV. I'm not a developer. I built an Apple TV app for my kids over the weekend. But everyone is going to have their own versions of whatever they want, just custom built for them.
Yeah.
Do you think that's the reality we're going to live in or no?
I think there's sort of two worlds, right? And I like to think about it as my phrasing for this was agents as browsers versus agents as web pages. If you think about it, the internet is everyone's got their own web page, right? You have HTML and CSS and you build a slightly different web page and then you deploy it. And there's a few people that you kind of deploy your web pages with. But we see everyone has their own custom website that they want to ship. And Vercel sort of also positioned for that world where if everyone has their own slightly different agent, but an agent that you build versus one that I build is kind of the same harness with the same stuff around compaction, just with a few different tools and skills. And there's a world where everyone has agents and you want a place to deploy that. There's also a world where there's only a few agents that the world more or less uses. Maybe it's just, ChatGPT and Claude and a few others. In that world, I think of agents more as browsers, where it's kind of like how we all just have a couple of browsers that we use, but there's a few different agents that everyone ends up using with a lot of different content that agents can reach out to. But if you deploy on Vercel or any other cloud, you're not hosting agents as much as you're actually hosting all the content that agents want to reach out to, the same way the browsers would pull content that's hosted on Vercel. And then there's also an argument to be made for, I think you have an internet where people use agents to browse the internet, and then those agents are literally just talking to other, there's an MCP server or something that's backed by another agent on the server that actually handles that response.
Yeah.
Right. So in reality, maybe banking even starts to look like I talk to my OpenClaw to go send you a payment, and that just talks to an agent on Chase's side to actually make that happen.
You're listening to We Built What, the podcast for engineering leaders building in the agentic era. I'm Emma Webb from Augment Code, and I'm here today as Pranay Prakash, engineering leader at Vercel. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
What is the thing that you think most engineering leaders are not fully grasping yet? Is there something that you find yourself constantly re-explaining or kind of like helping people get to this new level of understanding in this era?
Yeah. No, that's a great question. I think one of the things that we've been talking a lot about at Vercel, and this comes from Malta, who actually gave this talk, the CTO who gave this talk recently about software is free, as in puppies, as in you can so easily write software right now, right? And so it becomes everyone's job, especially as a software developer. Writing code, producing code at scale isn't so much the bottleneck anymore. And like you guys know this very well at Augment. But I think using discretion and like basically writing tasteful software and like having a sense of taste of like, what do you not ship, right? If you can ship anything, you probably shouldn't ship everything. There's a lot of code that you could ship that's very easy. It's very easy to fork something on the internet, for example, and create your own and create your own version of this that's less secure, but it's like it has bad DX, for example. I think it's easy to ship a lot of software that isn't easy to maintain afterwards. One of the things that Vercel has always been really good at, and I've thought this well before I joined Vercel, was DX and taste, right? Is how do you write software that developers like using and want to use, and you want to use on day one and it's really fast on day one, but also scale to 1 million users, and there isn't a huge gap between that, like day 0 to day 100. I think that's still like hard to do, right? It's easier to do now because we can write a lot of software, but I think that's where and I'm glad that's where we get to spend our cycles thinking of how do we write good, tasteful software. Yeah.
I'm really curious about this point about taste, because I 100% agree with you that Vercel is known for taste and known for DX. So the thing that I'm so curious about, and I think that folks are talking a lot about in this era of AI, is this taste concept. And how do you scale taste at Vercel? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, how does that permeate the organization such that everyone has this inherent understanding of what that means?
Yeah. No, I asked G almost that exact question of just how do you maintain that level of quality bar and taste at an org that's grown this big, because it was also wild coming back after, and I was actually the first intern at the time, so only the first summer, or like roughly a year, and then I came back, and one of the things that stood out to me when coming back to a company this big is that the company has changed, but he himself is sort of very similar as a person. And I was laughing because his answer to this is just like extreme ADHD. And I think he's just like, and he holds us like you're just like super obsessed with the details, right? You're super obsessed with, and it goes back to the same point of like, if you can write anything and you can ship anything, it becomes your job to be obsessive about the details and taste here. I think it's just that he and leadership have held that to such a high degree that it kind of naturally percolates through the org. And I've seen that through the company, where even now when we're at almost 800 people, it's really easy with the engineering team having such a high bar of engineers at Vercel that everyone naturally, anything you ship goes under a lot of scrutiny, but not a lot of process.
Yeah.
Just not a lot of scrutiny because everyone cares a lot.
What does scrutiny without process look like? We give you an
Chaos. It means everyone has an opinion.
Okay.
Right. And at Vercel we have this mantra of like, you can just ship things, and like we truly mean it in the sense that like if anyone has an idea, they can just ship whatever they want to ship. And we ship a lot at Vercel. Everyone's always like building new projects, but we use Slack a lot, and we all sort of advertise and demo anything that we're building. And everyone has an opinion. It doesn't matter what team you're on. You could be working on, like a pricing page, for example, and then you see a demo come through around
whatever
a workflow SDK, and I'll get like comments on a Notion doc on this, right? And I kind of love that because you have people from all across the org who have tons of experience in different things that all like want to share an opinion. It isn't like a very formal review process.
Yeah, I get it.
It's just that someone who finds it interesting will review it and like will leave comments.
And you have the culture where you are both expecting and appreciating everybody to comment on your work and to give you that constructive feedback.
Yeah, I think there's like a lot of what we call like same team, but it's everyone across the org feeling like they're responsible for anything that gets shipped, right? And I think that's certainly the other part that I miss, but because you can just ship things, we're also all responsible for everything that gets shipped.
One of the other things I've been thinking a lot about is how you give agents this taste framework when they're doing the execution of the work. And my first, let's call it like my naive idea was, well, do you write a spec for your organization? Like, do you have here are our values, here's what we care about, here are all of the things that we would tell a new employee before they go and build something. And the feedback I got on that was, it probably won't work because those things are very open to interpretation. They're not crystal, in most cases, they're not concrete enough. Is this a problem that needs to be solved? Like, how do we give agents this understanding that an employee would have?
No, I think that is I mean, obviously we use a lot of skills, and we have a lot of internal skills for this kind of thing.
Sure, brand guidelines, things like that. Yeah,
exactly, brand guide. So if you think about it, think about this as like a linter, right?
A taste linter.
Yeah, because pretty much if you were writing code, you don't want to spend all of your PR review cycles telling people, hey, this is missing a semicolon. That's not the kind of code review that anybody wants to give or wants to like have to deal with receiving. So we just try to codify as much of that as you can into linters, like, your JavaScript, like prettier biome or whatever. So it could be, brand guidelines for marketing, and we have those as well. We have our own agents for when you're drafting a blog post, you're drafting a change log. We try to codify all of the best practices and the comments that we leave there. You find yourself leaving more comments there, try to just put it into the skill. The same thing with code. We launched skills.sh, which is a marketplace for agent skills. We have a place where basically you can run like npx skills, add whatever, like you would install a package in npm. And one of the first skills that we shipped was React best practices, right? Which is, let's take all of the knowledge that the people that work on this framework know, codify whatever they can into a skill that we can update and keep pushing to. So the same stuff that we keep telling customers when they run into an issue, or the stuff that we see internally for code review, or we see for how we write, our brand guidelines, we find yourself constantly doing that. We try to put it and package it into a skill so you can just replicate that over and over again.
Tell me if I'm wrong, but I feel like you can get it 80%.
Yeah.
And then there's still a bit of a gap.
Yeah, for sure. I was just gonna say that works great in theory for the most part, but there's always 20%, and and that's the same thing with code. That's probably why we're still safe for a little bit of software engineers, up until the models are incredibly good at this. But yeah.
So you're the engineering lead on the Workflows product. We talked a little bit kind of about what that is in terms of the ability to have kind of long-running agents at Vercel. Vercel, known primarily for front end, for very fast requests, but now we have the ability to have these really long-running tasks, long-running processes that are happening with Workflows. I know part of that for you is about durable agents. Can you tell me what a durable agent is and how we should think about that concept?
Yeah, for sure. So I think I was saying this earlier, but an agent is basically just this loop between calling an LLM and running one or more tools pretty often. So call an LLM, run some tools, call an LLM, run some tools, and you keep doing that in a loop. Um, I think about this is if you're familiar with the CLI and you have this running in a CLI, it's just a script. You have a process that's running locally that keeps doing that loop. And as long as your computer is alive, as long as you don't like shut the lid down or you disconnect from Wi-Fi or whatever, this agent will continue to run. If anything ever does disconnect or you ever do close your laptop lid or Control C, you can go right back into the CLI. It won't just resume, but it stored everything in a local, like on disk, and so like your entire conversation history on disk. So it can just pick up the conversation history and you can continue from there. Now that works great when you're running stuff locally, but when you want to do cloud agents, this gets trickier if you were trying to do this yourself. Workflow takes a different approach where you write your code in the same way, but every single step of that loop happens it gets orchestrated as its own serverless function. It uses a queue in between. So every time you make an LLM call, it goes over a queue, uses a serverless function dedicated to just running that LLM call. It gets retried in case the provider is down. And then when it's done, it persists its memory into a durable event log, which is either Postgres or, in the case of Vercel, it's Dynamo and S3 backed, but some sort of cloud backend. And then when it runs the tools, again, if you have to run 10 different tools, you run 10 different serverless functions. Each one gets its own dedicated process and retrying. It's all over a queue. Everything is persisted, and you can continue. This means you can run agents for far, far longer. You're not tied to a serverless function timeout. You're not tied to the life cycle of a single server. You're not tied to the memory pressure or the memory capacity of a single server. You can run agents that run for days or weeks, or for example, with Guillermo's chess match, an agent that's literally been running since Christmas Eve. And it'll just work, and it's durable, and every single step's persisted to an event log, so you can audit everything. You sort of get this observability for free. It's not something you have to add in. Just for the nature of how the system works, you sort of have all of this. And for us, I think we think of durable agents as like the combination of having that local DX, so you can write an agent the way that you would just write something that works locally. But when you deployed it, whether it's to Vercel or Workflow itself is open source, and we have other worlds and other adapters, so anywhere that Workflow runs, it should just work with all that orchestration handled for you, so you don't have to worry about any of the infrastructure there.
Everybody in AI loves to ask this kind of prediction question, like 3 to 6 months from now, where will we be? Do you think 3 to 6 months from now, the meaningful change that we'll see is going to be in the underlying technology or the tooling that we've built around it? Or is it going to be in our expertise and ability to use those tools, or both? Or a fully different opinion?
No, yeah. I think we're very much in the early days of the tooling and everything, and I think we're sort of almost on a weekly basis, like looking at the next thing and going like, holy shit, this changes everything. And then a week later, you're like, that was totally obvious in hindsight. For me, this reminds me of like, I feel like I've been coding for a very long time, and I've been writing JavaScript since like, I don't know, 2008 or 2010. And this reminds me of like the early JavaScript days where even like basic things like ES5 and ES6 and stuff we were doing with bundlers was kind of the same, just in that smaller niche of like everything felt like it changed everything. Stuff that we were doing like NPM and Browser and Gulp and CoffeeScript and like jQuery, and then you come up with React and Angular, and suddenly everyone's like, oh, this is sort of the obvious way to develop things. Yeah. Anyway, I'm not sure that answers the question as much as like.
Well, it does. And I think the thing that you said that I really stuck onto was that week by week, and we're here in San Francisco, we both work at, developer tool companies, AI companies, and week by week, there's this feeling of, holy shit, this changes everything. And then the next week you have this feeling of, oh yeah, obviously. How do you manage that? Because that's a lot to do. The pace of it is really unrelenting. It's fun, it's exciting, but it's also, I think everybody's got this kind of like white knuckle feeling that you're having all the time. How do you personally manage it? How do you think about it? How do you stay on top of it? Or does it not bother you at all? You're like, yeah, it is what it is. This is the moment.
Less so now, and I'll tell you why. I think I, like a lot of people, were scared when AI specifically scared as like AI started to blow up, because I think we all had a feeling of being like we would get left out if we weren't like in it. For me, for context, I was coming out of my startup. We'd just gone through an acquisition, and I decided I was going to take some time off. So I took a year off before I got back to Vercel. And for a while there, I was looking at everything going around me and everyone else like developing, being on the forefront of AI, and I had no idea what was going on. And I definitely had this fear of things are moving so fast. If I leave tech right now, and if I come back in a year or come back in 2 years, am I just starting from scratch?
Can I
Do I
catch
not,
up?
can I catch up? Yeah. Do I not know anything? And then it was actually surprisingly fast to catch up and to come back. Because I do think, and this comes back to, I think taste. I do think even though things are being developed and things are really fast, that's also always been the case. And I think what I found for myself is that the fundamentals kind of don't change. I think the basics of taste and design and being product minded and how do you think about value to the user. When we think about at Vercel, we think a lot about, for us, a lot of this is developer experience, right? What is the developer experience? That hasn't changed. We still want developers for the best experience. And I think if you have a good sense for that, and if you can empathize for that as a developer, you could go to Nicaragua for the next 3 years, come back and like get back into code. And I think you'll just be fine. The tools have changed, but the primitives haven't.
Yeah.
Um, so I think ever since taking that view, that's kind of changed for me, especially after joining Vercel and then seeing that the world has changed a lot, but in some ways it also hasn't.
This is a really comforting message for people, I think. You're saying, don't let it freak you out.
Mm.
Focus on the fundamentals. And I would say I'll add another piece to that, which is because it moves so quickly, it's very hard for anyone, I think, to be a fully cutting edge expert.
Yeah.
Like everybody is always
I think
having to relearn.
You'll get overwhelmed and you'll burn yourself out if you're trying to, if you're going into the AI world out of fear, you're going to burn yourself out and you're going to get overwhelmed, right? But if you go into I think now for me, it's a lot more of excitement of like, there's a lot going on and I get to be a small part of helping define that future. That's what we obviously hope for. And we can, and like, we found like our niche that we like working on, we think we can add value. And that's just software engineering. That the world is going to continue to just grow really fast.
Okay, so Pranay, you're the engineering leader on the Workflows open source project at Vercel. I know it's been in beta. Can you tell me about what you've learned and kind of what's on the horizon for that product?
Yeah. We launched Workflow last year in October in beta. And at the time, it was already, when we launched something in beta at Vercel, it's something that we've already tested and dogfooded a bunch. We'd done 1 million runs at the time. Since then, that we're going to GA next week, we've done over 100 million runs on Workflow, which is a huge achievement for the team. And also, even though it's been in beta, it's currently the backbone of a couple of different startups. Their entire infrastructure relying on Workflow. Yeah.
Which ones?
Some that we're announcing right now, like Flora, and we actually just did like did a really cool case study with Flora and Mux. And Durable's another company as well. So
amazing. You guys launched in October.
Yeah.
It's April now. There are already startups built around this product.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
There's startups that fully rely on a beta product, which is both terrifying at first, but I'm so glad, the team's been able to get all of the infrastructure in a really good place. And so now for us going to GA is basically, for the most part, it's just like, hey, we've already run this in production at scale. We run a lot of V0 at Vercel runs a lot of its stuff on Workflow. A lot of Vercel infra is running on Workflow as well. Let's just tell people that you can actually use this in production. It's safe.
You're just kind of changing the label, like 100 million agent runs. You're like, yeah, it's fine.
Yeah. We already had, I think we did our sprint towards like madness back in January when it started to blow up for the first time. So now funny enough, the GA launch is actually a lot more relaxed than when we went to beta in the very beginning.
That's what we want. We want a kind of non-event for some of those changes.
Exactly. Yeah.
Awesome. Pranay, it's been so lovely talking to you. Thank you so much for sharing everything that you're working on at Vercel. I think for folks who are trying to figure out this AI native engineering world, it's really nice to hear this thought that, oh, you can just take some time off and go to Nicaragua. Like you don't need to, you don't need to full grind, full send. Like you will be able to get catch up. You'll be able to get caught up. It's all good.
I might have stolen that from my own story of going to Nicaragua and while I was on my break for a bit.
There you go. Well, that's how you came back so zen. But everyone needs a little beach in their life. Thanks for listening to We Built What, the podcast for engineering leaders building in the AI era. If you like what you heard, please like, subscribe, share with a friend, and we'll talk to you next time.